All right, I'll start digging through it, and hopefully, it'll be somewhere in my pile of sketch covers because I have like a few bins that I need to just basically sort through. And it's funny because as a sketch cover artist, at the beginning of your career, you want to grab every sketch cover you possibly can because you want to say, well, if I go to a show, somebody might want Iron Man, so they'll want it on
Right.
an Iron Man sketch cover, or they'll want
An
Wolverine. So let me
Avengers
get a couple
blank
of
or
X-Men's.
yep.
So then you start building this huge collection, and then you go to the shows, and then people bring their own sketch covers, or they give you extra ones, and then all of a sudden you're like, where the hell am I going to put all this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Just accumulates really quickly.
Yeah. So that's when you have to start investing in storage,
Uh,
like Phil over there in the back with all those.
This ain't all of it. You should see. I got another shelf right here, and another one right here.
I have a storage unit. It's that bad. I do want to get into some of the work that Phil has commissioned
Yeah.
and have you talk a little bit about the process because, as I said to Phil yesterday, we got to get Jose to talk about coloring. Um,
Okay.
when it comes to what you've been able to do on sketch covers for a long time at a very, very high rate of quality, it's the coloring work. Lots of people can do the line work. There are a good amount of folks who ink well. But in general, a lot of people like to keep it as minimal as possible, not because it's a real artistic choice, but because they don't know or not confident about doing the kind of coloring that you do with markers on a consistent basis. And like I said, at a very, very high quality. The output, it's phenomenal. So I do want you
Thank
to
you.
talk a little bit about how you do coloring, what you're using, and some of the things that you think are important to really make standout work.
No problem. Absolutely.
I was just more curious. Maybe you could start with like maybe with because I know that this was supposed to be done like two months ago when Scott Blair passed. And I know that he was kind of your first one to give you insight to Copics and then even
Hmm.
Lydic even. So I don't know if you wanted to like touch base on those and then with the coloring process and how it
Sure.
evolved over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually met both Steve Lydick and Scott Blair at a local convention called SuperCon back in maybe 2007, 2008, something like that.
Wow. Okay.
And Scott Blair, I remember going to Scott Blair's table, and it was like you couldn't even see the guy. Like there was so much. It looked like it was like some kind of like a press release or something. It was really. I'm like, who is this guy? Because I couldn't even see him. There was so many people in front. Everybody was looking at through his stuff, and I was able to get a glimpse of some of the stuff that he was doing at the time, and I was just blown away. I was like, man, like this is badass. And I see him with these little markers on the table, and he's like doing stuff with it, and I'm like, is that what he's using? Like I didn't know, but I didn't have a time, like a moment to actually speak with him because he was just so he was just basically networking and talking with people and all that stuff. So I just kind of looked at his process a little bit, and I wrote down the name of it, and at the time it was Copic markers. And then I met Steve Lydick, and Steve Lydick was and still is, in my opinion, he's a genuine sweetheart. Like that guy, if he's whatever he's doing, he'll take a moment to just talk with you, and like just shoot the breeze. And especially if you're talking about art, or if you want to ask him, even if you ask him about his process, like he'll tell you. He's like, oh, I use this and this and this. And so he also was using Copics, and at the time, I always joke with him because I'm like, dude, you're like a walking like art supply store. He literally has a kiosk of like Copic markers because he has, I think, every color under the sun. And that was my introduction to it. And I saw what he was able to do with it, and so I went ahead and I started small. I bought like maybe some grays, like a cool gray set, and I just started playing around with it and blending. Mind you, let's go back to when I was in high school and stuff. I used to go to a magnet program for art from elementary all through high school, and then afterwards I went to college for university to study art. So I had certain skills, like I knew how to airbrush, which I don't know if like half of the people, some of these people don't even know what an airbrush is anymore. But yes, all those blending things, all those beautiful transitions of color that you guys see with digital coloring, we used to do it by hand using an
Right.
airbrush and liquefied acrylic paint into a tool that allowed you to kind of like create like a mist, almost like using a spray can, but much more refined. So understanding that, and I also had an understanding of color theory because that's what I studied. I studied color theory. I studied using different materials, different surfaces, illustration board, canvas, the whole nine yards. Watercolor paper. I use different medias, and what I mean by mediums are like watercolor, acrylic, ink,
Oil
color
and yep.
pencil. The
Mhm.
only thing I didn't like using was oil because it just took too long.
Right.
So I took my knowledge of that and I kind of like poured it into, okay, how do I make this work with these markers? And I started with the grays just to understand what values are. How do I blend things from light to dark? How do I. And then I did a few pieces. I did a rhino, like that was all gray with just a little bit of flesh tones and stuff. And I did that. And then the way that I approached it is as I did a project, I would say, what colors do I need? So I only bought what I needed at the time to complete the project. And I started building up my core um, go to colors, per se, over time. So then I started to realize, okay, well, now I don't have to buy this particular color and this particular color. I just mix these two together. And now I have a transitional color, and I don't have to buy like four or five markers to do the same thing that I could do with two markers. And over time, that's how I started getting familiar with Copic markers. And to this day, I think they are still the best markers on the market when it comes to blending. I've tried others. They're not bad, but I think that something in the formula allows for the transition of the alcohol, to blend much smoother. So you get less streaks and things like that when you're
Right.
blending. And that's how you see, my work is like, oh, his work is so polished and this and that. I'm like, well, the foundation is done with Copic markers. If I didn't have Copic markers, I would then have to use like watercolor or something that you could kind of move around while it's still wet in order to be able to make those transitions of color. So the foundation of everything is pretty much, as far as like the coloring is done with Copic markers. And then on top of it, I will use ink. I will use color pencil. My favorite color pencils to use, believe it or not, um, everybody goes crazy over like polychromo color pencils. Like that's like what Adi, what's his name? Adi Granov?
Yeah, Adi Granov.
He uses those exclusively. You have other people that use like pastel pencils, So, and I've used them and they're great. I actually like these, and I feel like they're gonna get discontinued eventually because they used to be like a large selection, and now you can just get like small kits of it or small sets. They're called Prismacolor pencils, but they're called Verathins.
Yes, I've seen those. Okay.
Okay, they're called Verathins. They're not the Prismacolor like the regular Prismacolors. They're like these little thin color pencils. You maybe get a set of like 36 of them. But and the lead is not as soft as say the polychromos are full with like so much pigment, because pigment is what you mix in with these materials in order to be able to get your color. So how much pigment you put into the mixing of that material will determine how bright or how intense those colors are going to be. So that's why polychromos, those polychromos from Faber Castell, are super expensive, because they have a higher grade of pigment and less
And the
fillers
mixture.
and things like that. So that's why you buy a set, it's like $300 if you get like a full like one of those big sets. Whereas if you buy something else from some other place, it'll cost you like $80 or so. So I use those very thin pencils for doing very very subtle blending and on the faces. You could sharpen them to a very fine point and get like some really small details in areas where the markers maybe are just a little too bulky and can't really get in there. So that helps. So a lot of my work tends to be mixed media. I don't particularly use just one thing. Now I'm a big fan of those paint markers. Like I said, I use those on my artwork as well because sometimes you want to bring back some highlights or you want to bring back something that is going to be like defining and sharp. And the best way to do that is with a paint marker or use regular paints. But if you're like me, who's kind of a lazy bum and doesn't want to have like multiple like jars of paint all over the place and I don't have the space for it, I just get a set of like kind of like your basic colors and you can mix and do whatever it is you want to do. They're water soluble up until a certain point, but they dry like acrylics. So as long as I'm working, I can take a brush with a little bit of water, and as I do my line, then I go back in with the brush and kind of like blend it out. So you have that transition of like that sharp, acrylic bright color, and then now it's just blending away into everything else. And so that's kind of like my process as far as like sketch covers are concerned. I tend to draw everything first with pencil. In the case of Phil, sometimes because he likes specific things and he likes, like really interesting detail and angles and things like that. If I have the time, maybe I'll sketch it out on an iPad.
Okay.
I'll rough it in on an iPad just because I want to get the
The
the image the way
composition
I
and
want, right? The composition. And one of the things that when you're working on a sketch cover, the more times you pass over it with an eraser, and the harder you, because some people are very heavy-handed with their drawing, you leave a lot of scuff marks, you leave a
right.
lot of, and it just doesn't look as clean when you go to put color and you go to put the inks and everything on top. So by doing that, I kind of like sketch everything out sometimes on an iPad, and then I take this is a process that I learned back in high school. Take a piece of transparent paper, like tissue paper or tracing paper, right? You take the image and you flip it over on the iPad. So if the image is facing right, you flip it to the left. You put the transparent paper over and you use it like a light box. And you
Got
take
it.
your pencil and you just basically trace over the general outline of the design itself, like the whatever you put together, and then you take that and you flip it over and you put it on top of your sketch cover, and then with the another pencil, doesn't matter what pencil it is, you just kind of rub it with graphite. And what that does is it transfers the lines that you drew on the opposite side directly onto the sketch cover.
Let me just say, folks, this is why there are a lot of Jose Varese 9/8s out there also. Because as you were saying, a lot of that early rough work on the sketch cover blank, it does leave scuff marks. It can leave impressions on the paper, where for those of us who are very much about having the highest grade possible, um, you're basically cutting down the chances of getting a 9/8, 9/6, etc. So
Yeah.
for the folks who are like, what's going on where my book came back at a 9.0, well, if you are somebody who cares about the grade, you would want an artist who takes a more subtle approach to, making sure that he has the right image on that paper before moving forward with the process. Somebody who's trying to actually figure things out on the paper, which is not a problem. I mean, that's not something that's a big deal for me, but I know that there are folks that are out there, who care that not only do I have a one of one with this blank, but it's a one of 198.
Hmm.
Your approach makes it possible. That's another reason why you're not only getting these unique works of art, but you're getting unique works of art that are high grade in
Yeah,
terms of how it would actually be rated by CGC, CBCS, etc.
it helps. It does. It certainly does help to keep your your initial like stress on the book, to try and make it as minimal as possible. Like another thing that I encourage people to do is get yourself some cheap, inexpensive construction paper. Black paper is fine, and have that as your surface. Have it on put it on your table. Put your book on top of it, and that will eliminate any kind of like smudges or scuffs or anything that you might pick up from the bottom of the table. And at the same time, that extra the because that paper is so inexpensive, the fibers on that paper are kind of like, it almost feels like a velour, like a fuzzy kind of, and it keeps the book kind of anchored
Right.
while you're working. So construction paper, velour paper, those kind of things, they help minimize first all the dirt that you're going to get on the back of the book, and at the same time it keeps the book from sliding off or doing whatever it is that is happening. Another thing I like to use when I'm drawing with a pencil is, some people use those little gloves, like the little gloves that kind of like
Yeah.
cover your pinky finger and part of your hand and
Yep.
keep you from like scuffing. Even those gloves to me leave like ghosting. They leave like a little bit of, like, they spread a little bit of that graphite. So what I do is I just use a common regular sheet of white paper, put it right next to it as you're drawing. You put your palm on it and you're drawing, and that white paper is your buffer between the comic and what you're doing, and it definitely avoids you from smudging or creating like that pencil thing,
Yeah.
that what do you call it, the
Everybody who
haze.
collects everybody who collects sketch covers knows exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, it's
You
the
know,
haze, the pencil haze. Yeah.
some
Um,
people it's more likely to show up, and again, if you value the art, that's what it is. You just kind of like go with the flow. But for those folks who are a little bit more conscious of the overall presentation of the book and are looking to
uh,
grade it, these things make a difference, in terms of cutting down on smudges and, hard impressions on the actual cover itself.
they certainly help. I mean, there are certain factors as an artist you have no control over. Like if you get a sketch cover and the corner's slightly dinged, or there's an impression where the staples are, or there's a little scuffing on the right hand side where the all of those things that are beyond your control as an artist, and you have to like. That's another thing that why I don't do as many commissions as I used to, because I used to get frustrated with that too, because like you can go out of your way to like really make this into a pristine book, and a printer defect or a shipping defect, or even at the time, I'm not gonna say anything.
At the
Like
grading
sometimes,
site.
let's just let's move on from that. Things happen that normally didn't happen when you submitted your book, and then all of a sudden you get a lower grade and you get the book back and you notice, well, what is this ding on this corner? I didn't notice this ding when I was doing this art. I took pictures, and sometimes I would do that. I would take like pictures of the book with the artwork already done so that I could kind of like
Yeah,
scrutinize.
compare. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So those things also happen, and those are things that are beyond the artist's control. And what the unfortunate um situation that happens is that if you're not somebody that understands that there are other factors that affect your grade, if you're new to this game and you get something from an artist and you get it back with a 9.6 or a 9.4, you associate it with the artist's quality of the work, and you don't
Unfortunately, yeah.
associate it with the surface that is actually being graded. It's not the
Right.
work.
Exactly. Yeah, people, I know exactly what you mean, which is why that's not important to me. I mean, I don't want something that looks like a car ran over it, but essentially, if it's a 9.4, 9.2, to me, as long as the actual artwork really represents what I like about that artist. Like if it's something that like definitely screams Jose Varese, but is unique in its own way and has a character that I appreciate, I'm good. But I get what you're saying. There are those people who almost sort of confuse the two. There's the work itself. Are you happy with the work? That's one thing. The other part, that's all CGC. That's
Mhm.
all CBCS. That is subjective. That's what they did with the book in some cases, you
Whoever's
know.
grading it at the time. I mean, it could be somebody that had a bad date with their wife, or they had a situation where somebody screwed them over and they're just not in the right kind of frame of mind. And
Absolutely.
those are factors that you can't control. And what I tell people all the time, especially people that want to get things graded, I said, look, I don't really do it. If you have a facilitator, if you have somebody that, that is a witness, or, somebody that is endowed by CGC or CBCS to be able to, provide me with a letter that I could sign and say, I did the work and this is the year and this is my signature and that's it. And we mail it out. Anything that happens after that is really beyond my control.
Right.
Don't reach out to me because CGC is taking 6 months to get your book back. Not my problem.
Right.
I sent the book. I sent the art. You took the risk of wanting to get it graded. And whatever happens after it leaves my hands, you have to understand that you can't come back to me and yell at me because some other entity has been holding your book hostage for over a year. There's nothing I can do. I don't have
Absolutely.
any power. Not even as an artist, I have any power with CGC other than to be able to submit my own books. And that's about it.
Right. Right. I mean, again, it's about the artwork, in my opinion. Not saying, look, you pay for a service. So, of course, you
Yeah.
want CGC to do what you expect them to do. But if the book comes back a 9.4, but it's a kick ass piece, you should be happy that you have a great piece of art. But I've seen and heard it before where there are those people who are like, oh, what did the artist do with this? Did they,
Mm,
like you said, may not necessarily be the artist who's responsible for whatever ding or issue there is with the book physically. And then you got to do your research also in terms of the artist process. Because there are some people, if you really want their best work, it may not be the neatest and nicest presenting book that
yeah.
lends itself to that 9.8, you know? So
I've seen
there's a
artists that
lot.
actually paint on the back of the cover. Like they'll test colors on the back of the sketch cover and then they'll paint on the front. And they're like, "What? Like this is what I do." And then
Absolutely.
you, as and you have to. I understand. Sometimes I play devil's advocate when it comes to things like this. I understand that a lot of the guys that commission work are people that are trying to get the work flip the work, sell it
Right.
at a high dollar
Absolutely.
value. And obviously you want to have it at the best grade, 9.8 being like mint, and saying, okay, now I can go ahead and ask for, if I paid this much, I can ask for this much
Right.
and be able to get that because it's a 9.8 and the work is like you said, the work is top tier and it's got a 9.8 grading, so I can command a higher amount. So I understand why sometimes if you're somebody that does this as like as a side job, or if this is your full-time job, how you would get perturbed if all of a sudden you
It
got a
makes a
book.
difference. It
Yeah,
does in terms of how much money the book will command. Absolutely. I get it. It's just, I don't think we should get to the point where we're confusing the quality of the art with, those other factors, like how
yeah,
much the resale value will be. And, if you're a 9.8 collector, I respect it. More props to you, but you got to understand that there's going to be, or at least you have to have some margin for error. Like, if you commission 8 pieces, the chances that all 8 are going to come back 9.8s. Like there's just so many things that can happen in terms of the artist process when it gets to CGC, what the mail person's doing. I mean, like it's just there are a lot of different reasons why you
yeah,
may not get that 9.8 grade,
yeah.
but I thought people would appreciate hearing the kind of care that you put into actually putting your work down on the book itself, because it does sound like you're at least creating a situation where it's likely that they're going to get that 9.8 grade or a high grade if they choose to go that route.
Well, it also has to do with the fact that I tell people all the time, I'm not the cheapest guy in town. I'm not the most expensive guy in town because I've seen some really, really like some stuff. I'm like, whoa, you pay how much? But a lot of times people pay for the name, and since I my name is not like I'm not a affiliated with any of the major
Publisher.
studios,
Yeah.
major publishers, and I don't think I'll ever will be because I kind of like made my peace with that a long time ago. And when anybody that asks me, it's not that I'm jaded or anything like that. It's just that I realize that you're a very small fish in a very big pond, and everybody's trying to swim to get to that little bit of fish food at the very end, and that's maybe getting a publishing deal or something with like one of the big three. And things have changed from what happened, what we've seen in the 80s and 90s. You're a contracted artist. That means that you're contracted for the one project,
Right.
and there's no guarantee that you're going to get another one right behind it. So if you live your life that way, then you're going to end up like, and I don't mean to say this in a disrespectful way, but like Jack Kirby's a perfect example of somebody who had gave so much to the
Absolutely.
comic
Yeah.
book industry that really put himself health wise in a precarious situation because of his love for comics and working ridiculous deadlines and getting chewed up and spit out in the machine, and he gave us so much. I mean, it still influences me today. I still do the Kirby crackle and all that stuff.
Hmm.
I love that stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
but what do you have left over? Like you're working. You need to. What I tell artists is that you need to have a game plan as to what you want to really do. If you want to be a comic book artist, then you have to really understand that it's a hard-working job. You have to meet deadlines. You're being thrown things at the last minute. You're going to not always get paid what you think you're going to get paid, and a lot of times there's a lot of outsourcing now to like cheaper
Right.
artists because everybody's just corporate is just thinking about the bottom line. So my advice to any artist coming out that says I want to be a comic book artist, I say, great, cut your teeth and try and see what you can do, within the industry, but have a game plan about what you want to do for yourself, whether it be create your own characters, create your own independent publishing company, create your own IPs, shop those IPs around to not just comic book companies, but like streaming services and, gaming companies and all those type of things. Get yourself, if you can't afford copyright stuff, mail it to yourself. Mail
Right.
a copy to yourself. Post date that. Have that as your in case you do submit it to somebody and all of a sudden they think that they could steal your idea. And even then, they might still do it anyway, but
But you have something.
you have something. So what I tell people all the time is that, we as artists, it's a very difficult world that we're living in right now, especially now with the emergence of AI.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the people that we've worked for over the years, they're getting older too, and their priorities are shifting. Maybe they're not collecting as much as they used to. Maybe they want to cut back on spending money on comics and on original art and things like that. And those guys, who's replacing those guys? So that's when you have to think long term and say, do I want to continue doing sketch covers for the rest of my life? Or do I want to be able to do sketch covers because I love to do sketch covers, but have something to fall back on that allows me to truly give the best work that I can to every sketch cover that comes by my table? And that's the thing that I had to learn the hard way. But I think that I'm at that point in my life where I could say, okay, I know my value. and I know that my value may not be what fits within the price range of people, and that's fine. You're not going to offend me if you tell me, "Oh, dude, that's too much." You're probably used to getting sketch covers for this much money at the shows, but I'm not going to stop you. I'll even recommend other artists. I'll say, look, if you want to try and save a few bucks, maybe I can recommend you three artists that could do it for maybe less. Oh no, but I really like your work. Well, then this is what you have to do. You have to pay.
Get a print.
Get a print.
Yeah, I mean,
Get a print, or something like that, or you can get one of my art books from the Kickstarter, and you have something that you could look through the work. And if you want to get a remark, if you like my work, I'll do a remark. I'll do something on the book for you. I'll work with people, but I also understand that I cannot jeopardize my reputation as an artist and my health or my family. And those are things that happen when you don't know your value as an artist and you try and underbid yourself to get the job, and then you find yourself, like you said, you're in a hole that you can never get out of because the bills keep coming in every month and you're not clearing out all the stuff that you had done. So now you get people that are salty because you're, oh well, why is he doing this piece of art when you've been 1 year with my commission and I haven't even seen a sketch. And now you're telling me, like, look at all the stuff you're posting because you were at the show. You were at New York Comic Con and you're posting all this stuff. So that's what I mean about understanding your value, understanding how much time it costs you to do something, and spreading that out as far as your, like, think of it as a job. You get paid per hour. If you ask for this much money, and you can get the job done in, like, say, a day or two, then you could space that out and say, okay, this is what my average rate is per day to be able to cover my expenses, and then work off of that. And you are going to get those situations where people are going to say, man, it's too expensive, I can't afford it. No problem, brother. I get you. Why don't you save up? Save up. I
right.
got you. When you're ready, I got you. Or we can't do a full body. Let's do a three-quarter, or let's do a bust. You know, to get you going somewhere in the right price range. Because this is, at the end of the day, these are luxuries,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
these are luxuries, and I think a lot of artists have forgotten the fact that the fans, the clients, the patrons, those are our bread and butter and should be loved and respected as such. Phil, he's bought countless of commissions from me. Anthony's bought stuff from me. I have a lot of clients that I'm very appreciative to this day, even the ones that maybe bought something for me back in 2014 and I never saw them again. But the fact is that they sent me on my path and they put me on my journey to get to where I am today. And I couldn't be here without the support of all of these people. So you have to humble yourself in that sense. And you have to constantly understand that what you're doing um, is not a want. I mean, it's not a need, it's a want. And you have to understand that not everybody's going to have disposable cash to be able to spend all this cash on you at the time, and be respectful of that, you know. But it's everybody's different. Everybody has their own way of doing things. I've learned to be as humble as I possibly can, because you never know when this ride's going to end up stopping.
Thank you for checking out the Fandamn Collectibles YouTube channel. If you like this content, make sure you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and stay tuned because we'll be back before you know it.